Welcome back to another episode of the Kansas City Commercial Real Estate Market Pulse, sponsored by my company, Midwest Commercial Real Estate Advisors. You know, Raphael, I don't know if you listen to Michael Bull or not with America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I always found it hilarious. First off, I don't have Michael Bull's radio voice, but I always found it hilarious that he always says, you know, welcome to the show, sponsored by Bull Realty. That's my company, you know, so I kind of steal that from him because I don't have any sponsors other than my own company and my own time. So welcome to the show, sponsored by Midwest Commercial Real Estate Advisors. Look, this is episode 32. And, you know, this, I have to let everybody know that it's been probably 2 years in the making, but we are officially on Spotify and Apple, iTunes, and iHeartRadio, and all of the places. So you can now find the show on all of your podcast platforms. You know, I waited a bit to put it on those platforms because I really wanted to make sure that it was something we were going to continue to do, right? I've had other podcasts that have kind of fizzled out or they serve their purpose, right? But this is something that has proven time and time again to be valuable, not only connecting with great individuals like yourself, Raphael, but also bringing on other folks in the industry, talking about market reports, and one of my favorite segments, which is our deal spotlight. So we actually bring our deals live here on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and we pitch those deals and we answer questions live. How cool is that? It's an interactive process that I haven't really seen too many other people doing. So just a little bit of homework or housekeeping, mind you, before we get going. If you have questions, feel free to drop that here on LinkedIn or on YouTube. We have people monitoring those. I'll get the questions sent over to myself and we'll be able to get to those as well. Definitely give us a follow on your favorite podcast listening platform. I use Spotify, but I don't know whoever, I think there's a lot of people still using potentially Apple, but very exciting. So shout out to Katie. And I want to give her all the props on that. You know, that takes a lot of time, but if you've done real estate with Midwest or, any transactions with Midwest Commercial Real Estate, you've definitely interfaced with Katie. There's the rest of our team, Micah, Nathan, Chad, Nick, myself. We have 2 new folks joining the firm here very soon. So very excited about that. And we will introduce them and have them on the show when that happens. Anything from land and development opportunities, land consulting, development consulting, specifically in the flex industrial space that you want to reach out to us and talk about. That's been where we've been spending a lot of time. I've been brokering a decent amount of office buildings, believe it or not, investment office buildings. And I really am turning into Michael Bull, aren't I? Mr. Office over here. It's definitely not something I specialize in by any means. However, I do think it's a very interesting time for office. But if you have any needs in regards to land with development potential, townhomes, multifamily, Nick Morales is your guy. If you are a medical professional and you're looking to do a build to suit or lease a building or renegotiate your lease, or you need to expand or start your business, Chad Kagi is your guy. Nathan and I really head up the flex industrial side of things and office. Mike is your guy for the multifamily side of things. And so we've got you covered here in Kansas City. We're taking a unique approach, really dedicated to delivering top-notch service and results. And so that's our team. What we do here is to deliver value, right? And I was just kind of going through, and man, we got lots of show. We got a lot of viewers already. So I knew this was going to be popular with Raphael and his following. But, if you talk about, delivering value, and this was not on our agenda for today at all, but it's something that has been on my mind since Hormozy did his Guinness World Records last week on the book launch, right? But I was thinking about this last night and actually talking to some of our members of our mastermind group that are commercial real estate brokers, and his value equation is the dream outcome times the likelihood of success divided by the time delay and the effort and sacrifice from the client, right? And so you want to increase the feelings of the dream outcome and really understand that and increase the likelihood of success, but you want to decrease the time delay and the effort that your clients have to put in. I'm literally looking at just about everything we're doing in that lens right now, trying to create value. So we'd love to talk with you. We are not the brokerage for everyone. If you have a 250 unit Class A multifamily unit, project that's been just now delivered, I will refer you out. That is not my business. There are people that do that. But if you have a development opportunity, it's under 50,000 square feet, it's under 50 units, I might be the guy to go find the needle in the haystack. So do please reach out to us. Okay, that was a lot to get through, but why we're here today is to interview Raphael Collazo. And he was so gracious to have me on his show here recently. We had a great discussion. Raphael is the co-founder and president of Summit Commercial Real Estate, where he specializes in helping investors, developers, and business owners identify and execute successful commercial real estate strategies. If you take me and plot me in Louisville, I feel like we do the exact same thing in a lot of different ways. He's got a strong background in investment sales and tenant and buyer representation. Combining the market expertise, which we're going to talk about today, I'm going to really test Raphael's market expertise today because he's been posting all about these cool neighborhoods and things, and I've been commenting it on LinkedIn. So I've got some questions on that. But you got to have a passion for leveraging the digital marketing, right? And I know we both have that, and the social media to drive results. I did not know this, but you are the author of Before You Sign That Lease. How about that? We have an esteemed author here on the show. That is wonderful. And the host of the Commercial Real Estate Bosses podcast, where it is just, and his LinkedIn show, which has just blown up since COVID. So Raphael, that was a mouthful and a lot there. About 7 minutes worth of me listening to myself talk. How are you, my friend?
Great, man. No, it's an honor to be on your show. I know we've been kind of back and forth together. I've been following you for a while, and I really like what you've been doing on LinkedIn, and obviously the value that you provide your clients in the commercial real estate space. And so there's definitely been times where I've tried to emulate certain things that you're doing. So kudos to you. And it's kind of a cool thing about content creation and putting yourself out there. You get to kind of interact with people from all these different parts of the country. And I've even had a chance to connect with people around the world that are doing commercial real estate. So it's pretty cool, the world we live in today.
Most definitely is, and I think that at some point I'd like to have your opinion on this, but my prognostication, and I think I saw that, Stanford may or may not have came out with the first study that was talking about jobs actually going away from AI this week. Mm-hmm. There's been some big news this week. I feel like you and I should just have an episode every month where we cruise the internet like Andy Frisella does. We just like cruise the internet and say, hey, that stood out to me. What stood out to you? Now they're picking some very controversial topics. We will avoid those and talk about commercial real estate. But man, I mean, Trump is pushing out the Federal Reserve governor, one of those individuals, taking more and more, leadership and control over monetary policy. I've seen a lot of alarms coming in through my email box that from people that I really trust on that front. And we've got this stuff coming out about AI, really actually taking jobs, and I wonder if people kind of make the connection to commercial real estate, but yes, the old adage is location, 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 but really the fundamentals is jobs, jobs, jobs. I mean, everything in real estate is backed by jobs. Almost, not everything, but a lot of it is, right? I mean, if you got a massive data center, maybe that's not backed by a whole bunch of jobs, but it is backed by people spending money to use that technology, right? And people and businesses and residents in our real estate, they need to have work and they need to have jobs. So I'm just curious, have you been spending any time looking at AI and maybe not the downsides of it, but how it truly is going to kind of impact our business and maybe potentially continue to take some of these entry-level jobs away?
Yeah, no, I think it's only a matter of time before some of the, to your point, entry-level jobs get absorbed by users of the technology. I do still think that, and this is something that you're doing very well, is that you're leveraging these technologies to add value to your clients. And I think there's always going to be room for people in the economy that are able to do that. So I think over the last, I'd say about a year, I've been really focusing in on trying to get a better understanding of the technologies that are out there and then finding ways to incorporate them into my business such that I can, amplify the results that I provide to clients. And I think anyone in not only our industry, but really any industry, I think that's the only way that you can stay competitive, is to try to really focus in on understanding these systems and how they could how you could leverage them to better provide value. So as far as the broader impact of AI, I do think we're in the first or second inning of that. And I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see how things play out over the next few years.
Yeah. I heard some really smart people talking about this, and, these AI companies, a lot of them have not figured out how to monetize, right? Sure. You can, you have a user base of people paying $20 a month, but that's table stakes.
Yeah.
It is when industries figure out how these large language models and automations and AI is actually going to go into those businesses and industries. That's where it actually takes off, right? So I think a lot of people are like, man, this is really changing the world. Well, think about it in this light. Like, remember when everybody had the Nokia phone and we were playing Snake on the phone, or the flip phone that could literally just call and it was 10 cents for a text message? Mm-hmm. That's where AI is right now. We fast forward 2 to 3 years, I don't know what the landscape looks like, right? And so I think that's something to kind of keep in mind as we are very early. I love that point that you said, is there's a lot of change that could potentially happen based off of that. What we can do as real estate practitioners, investors, brokers, vendors in the space is adopt these types of technologies in a way that we at least have some formalities and we have some formalization of how to utilize this. What I've seen be a little bit challenging for people is they're like, yeah, I just spent $100,000 trying to build this AI automation custom, and I did, and it works. But then the last week that I got it done, a company just launched, and it's $10 a month to use the same service that I just spent $100,000 on. So I'm very cautious of like building super custom solutions up at this point, because every time I look up, I'm finding another software that's like, oh wow, that's really.
You talk about Lindley AI, which is, I don't know if you're playing around with it yet, but that's something that I'm actually joined a commercial real estate group on School, where I forgot the gentleman's name, but he's a big multifamily broker out of LA. And he started a school group where we're talking about a variety of different AI platforms and ways you can leverage them in your commercial real estate business. And this tool called Lindley AI helps you create automations. And the interesting thing about it too is that you can prompt it to say, hey, create this particular automation without you actually having to know how to code it out and everything else. So, I mean, I'm playing around with it right now, and I think that the cost of that, it's based on credits. So right now you get 400 credits for free, but if you want to pay $50 a month, I think, or $60, a very minimal amount of money for 4,000 credits, it can allow you to, automatically run some reports. So I created a report the other day that generates, pulls for the last week how many commercial permits have been filed for construction, and it sends an email to my inbox summarizing all the different projects. It tells who the owners of those buildings are. It tells what contractors are associated. It pulls the contact information, because when you file a permit, you have to provide all that information. So stuff like that, where you can create 5 or 6 or 7 of these automations, stack them on top of each other, and now you're the most knowledgeable person out there. And all you're doing is accessing public data. It's not. This isn't a. You're not reinventing the wheel, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Right. But look at this. If you're watching, I am taking notes right now, learning from Raphael, creating automations for data. I mean, it's public knowledge, right? But finding that information.
Instead of you spending hours doing the work, you can have this tool that you prompt to be able to do it, and you save yourself hours and hours and hours of time, and you're more knowledgeable as a result.
How about this as another automation? If you're a tenant rep broker out there, or you're a landlord rep broker, and you're trying to find businesses to go represent or to, fill your spaces up, having an automation that tracks every single news article about expansion, about raising money, about looking for multiple locations, right? And, I think that's just very valuable, because it's information that is out there, but you would have to go source it. Now it's just being sourced directly into your inbox. So, that is something that I want to focus on in the future. Okay, great. Awesome thoughts there, Raphael, on the artificial intelligence. We'll continue to brief everyone as as things move on. I just joined myself an AI CRE AI course for my favorite person in that space. I'm not actually going to say it because I don't want a ton of people actually going and figuring it out, because I think I might have been his first person that signed up this morning. He has been on this show, so you can go find him. And I'm a big proponent of the work that he is doing out there. And I've supported him since he's kind of gotten started and talked a lot about him. But I really, truly think if I can learn some of those techniques and other tools out there, that truly is going to help me and my business in the commercial real estate space. So very excited to continue to learn in that space. Well, let's get into what we wanted to talk about today, which is your market. So tell us, I get asked all the time, why Kansas City? But let's talk about why Louisville, and I think it's one of those markets that is somewhat similar to Kansas City. And when you think about commercial real estate, it doesn't really pop off the map, right? The Southeast does, New York City, Miami, Florida, Texas, all those, I actually have to show people like, hey, that's Missouri. Kansas City's actually in Missouri. And so I'm sure you kind of go through some of those same things as well. But
you have an interesting dynamic too, where correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the city is in Kansas and then the other side is in Missouri, correct?
That's exactly right.
So that's another additional layer of complexity that comes along with being in that market. And, there's obviously benefit that you understand that you can then provide to your clients. Now, as far as Louisville's concerned, so I'm not a native Louisvillian. I moved here back in 2017. My previous career was in engineering and software development. So I used to work at a company called Fast Enterprises. I traveled all across the country. I was in Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico. And then after Hurricane Maria hit, I got relocated to Louisville on more of a temporary basis, and then eventually became more permanent. I transitioned into commercial real estate brokerage back in 2019, and I've been operating in the space ever since. The reason why I think Louisville has a lot of value is that, number one, I think we're a very affordable city.
Yeah.
There's plentiful jobs out here in a variety of different industries, particularly logistics. So we're our logistical hub. You can access about 60% of the U.S. population within a day's drive. So UPS has a world port here, which is the largest presence in the country. FedEx also has a presence here, although Memphis is the headquarters. We also do have a strong presence for FedEx. Ford just announced a $2 billion expansion of their facility. Just further south here, Ford also has a battery plant that they've been developing, and so that's going to be a big economic driver for Elizabethtown, which is about 40 minutes south of here. We do have a lot of other industries. Humana's one of the main employers in the city, which is a Fortune 500 company. Yum Brands, which incorporates Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, a variety of different fast casual concepts. Again, also headquartered here as well. So, there's a variety of different employers that offer the jobs that you've described that ultimately lead to performance as far as commercial real estate investing. As far as investor interest, we get people predominantly in our region that are looking in Louisville. To your point, I think that the knowledge about Louisville is not quite as known around the country. So we do have some firms from the East Coast that have kind of dabbled here. I know there's been some California buyers that I've spoken with in the past that have done some digging in different markets, and Louisville keeps popping up for a variety of different reasons. So there is a little bit of percolation as far as investors on the coast, but for the most part, I'd say the people that I talk to are in the region. So Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, just have been the more active investors in the marketplace. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, 100%. I know you're very active in that market, and there's a lot of reasons that it stands out, right? And I think that if you dive into the numbers, I did my own research. Industrial continues to show strength. It seems like the inventory is around 204 million square feet, and vacancies holding near 4% in Q1 and tightening down to 3.7% in Q2, right? So, that's phenomenal.
Office and there's different sections of town,
Sure.
And I'm sure in Kansas City, it's the same. So, we've got the Bluegrass Commerce Park, which is the largest industrial park in the state. I was at an economic lunch last year where they were talking about the vacancy rate in the park, and the occupancy was 98.6%.
Wow.
In the park. So literally they've run out of space. There's very limited amount of inventory, and they've just annexed additional land that they're eventually going to develop more product on. So that's kind of the logistical mecca as far as people look when the people talk about wanting to have a company that incorporates logistics. That's kind of the mecca. You've got Waterson Park, which is more legacy product, but the zoning supports a little bit heavier uses. So you have heavy trucks. Manufacturing can operate in that environment. You also have the Airport Industrial District, which is right next to the UPS Worldport. Again, you got a lot of logistical companies there, but then you also have legacy product as you start going further east that is a little bit more heavy manufacturing, rubber, that sort of type of industry. And then you got the river port. So we're strategically located on a river, similar, I believe, in your market.
That's
so
right.
You've got a lot of, industry along the river that utilize the river as a transportation mechanism. So yeah, it just depends on the type of user. So oftentimes people will call and be like, hey, this is our company. Like, what are your thoughts on where we need to locate in the marketplace? And depending on what type of use they are, their needs as far as access, we'll kind of recommend different parts of town depending on what their needs are. So
absolutely. Expert insights coming from Raphael on Louisville and all the different industrial markets. Retail seems to be resilient too for you guys. Vacancies incredibly low. Seemingly right around 2%, and rent growth is strong, 4.5% year over year, even as absorption ticks negative, which could be that some of the retail that was developed is not necessarily what's at least what I'm seeing, not necessarily what has been asked for, or the rents are so high that it's like you have to get a very specific clientele in that space. But we have a very similar story on the retail side here in Kansas City as you guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably to that point, retail within a certain bound, and I'm sure you see this in your market. I mean, the users that are sub 10,000 feet, I mean, the stuff moves. I mean, it just does not stick around. And especially in areas of town that are kind of the, higher end demographic. I mean, the product moves, unless it's completely outside the bounds of reality as far as the asking rent. So in that regard, yes, product that's below 10,000 square feet is what I've been seeing, moves very quickly, but the big box spaces tend to be the ones that stick around a little longer, depending on where they're located. And so, to your point, I think that probably what you're seeing as far as the absorption rate is that, you've had some maybe larger big box tenants that have vacated, and that adds to the supply. But as far as the inventory below a certain threshold, it is still extremely active. And we're a very big foodie city, so you'll see a lot of different restaurants pop up around town. So second generation restaurant space is almost impossible to find. And I'm not sure if in your market that's the case, but it definitely is in our market.
Yeah, most definitely similar here as well. And then just moving on to the multifamily, it looks like it's remaining stable as well. You got about 92,000 units on the inventory, vacancy around 6%. And again, Midwest, 3.7% rent growth, right? And solid investment activity in the active listings and the sales volume. So, you know what? I mean, there's a lot of similarities between Louisville and Kansas City. I think it goes back to those fundamentals, right? Logistics, the jobs, the affordability, a lot of the same similarities that we see here in Kansas City. And then, also the latest Integra mid-year report suggests more commercial real estate markets, including Louisville, are moving into that recovery territory for the first time in years, and Kansas City's in that spot in some of the asset classes as well. I love that report. It's always puzzling to me a bit on how, what they're actually tracking to put Kansas City and Louisville and different markets in those specific buckets. But I do like looking at it, and it's a fun way to kind of say, is it expansion? Is it in a recession? Is it in a recovery? Or is it a growth kind of market? And I like to see that a lot of those markets that I'm more familiar with are positioned pretty well for the next couple of years.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think too, to your point regarding the local expertise, I mean, you could have the broader market be in a stage of recovery or in a stage of, recession or whatever that, metric you're looking at. But the sub markets within that individual city or municipality or whatever could very well be experiencing revitalization. There could be movement as far as, a tenant base is concerned that could maybe make that space, maybe make that sub market blighted. So it does, you have a broader overview with some of these reports, but until you're on the ground and really are talking to owners and you're interacting with people who are transacting, you don't really know what the nuance is at a more granular level. So I think you're right regarding that. It's a good way to start as far as analyzing the market, but this is why you're able to provide such value in your market, is that you get really granular and say, okay, well, yeah, maybe this is what you read in the newspaper, but this is actually what's actually taking place on the ground.
Absolutely. All right, some fun things here for our Louisville native. I know you're not what did you say, Louisvillian? Did I say that right?
Louisvillian. Yeah. You got to be careful with how you say it because they get on you. It's Louisville, not Louisville.
Louisville. All right. So let's settle this. If I have one afternoon in Louisville, am I sipping bourbon on the Urban Bourbon Trail, or am I catching a Louisville Bats game? What's the real locals' choice?
That's a great question. I mean, the Urban Bourbon Tour has gained traction as of late. I mean, it's definitely still a tourist event, tourist type of activity, but I highly encourage people to do it if they come to town. I mean, you've got a long line of potential spots that you can stop along Main Street. Particularly, one of my favorites is Angel's Envy. So if you've never had it before, it's phenomenal. It's especially their rye is probably one of my favorite ryes out there. But so that's one that I would encourage anyone to take advantage of when they come to town. We've seen some new brands pop up as well all along Main Street, going into the West Main Street is where you got several as well. But the Bats, I'm a big baseball fan. I don't really follow baseball as much as maybe I did in the past, but I still love being able to go out to see a game. It's very much a laid back pastime. It still is America's pastime. So being able to go to a Bats game is always a lot of fun. And sometimes you'll get you'll see people that are in because it's affiliated with the Reds. So it's the minor league equivalent for the Reds. And so you'll sometimes see players that start out at the Bats and then they go up to play in the majors. I believe Ellie De La Cruz was here. I actually went to a game where he was playing while he was in the minors. It was kind of cool to see. Now he's a very famous baseball player. So it's kind of cool.
Well, awesome. All right, let's talk about some hidden gym hangouts. If you're taking a client out to impress them, no chains, no cliches, where are you going? Give us the hidden gym restaurant or bourbon bar. And you kind of already did with Angel's Envy, but
but they become pretty big now. So if you haven't had Angel's Envy, you definitely got to try it. But yeah, so interestingly enough, Louisville has the largest Cuban population outside of Florida. So since COVID, I think we had about 30,000 people that were Cuban, and now we're closer to 60.
Wow.
So within a very short period of time, we've had a mass migration of people, particularly from Florida, because of the affordability piece. And also just once you get to a point where you reach a critical mass of people in your community, now my cousin lives there, my brother lives there, my sister lives there. So they start to migrate in these directions. So we have a very vibrant Cuban community. Some of my favorite spots to eat, La Bodeguita de Mima, which is right on Market Street. You've got Sweet Havana, which is one of the better bakeries in town that I really like. Actually a business affiliate of mine and myself own a building that is Sweet Colada is located in, which is an affiliate of Sweet Havana as well. So I'll always recommend checking out some of those places. As far as bourbon's concerned, Peerless is actually one of my favorites. It's definitely more of a niche brand, although they have gained traction in the past. And that's right on West Main Street as you start heading towards the Bats, where they manufacture the Louisville Bats. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. Okay. So what's one thing about the Louisville commercial real estate market that surprises people the most? It could be, a deal, a neighborhood, a project. What would blow our minds about Louisville that we don't know?
Blow your minds. Well, I think, and this is maybe something that people that are outside of the Midwest, when they come to Louisville and they start looking at some of the, the rent numbers or the pricing, I think they're kind of blown away by, oh, wow, like I don't have to buy a 4 cap in my local market. I can come to a market like Louisville and I could be in a pretty solid area of town. I could be, buying something that has strong fundamentals and ultimately has long-term value at a much more reasonable price than I expected it could. And so I think we're one of the markets. I don't know if Kansas City's the same, but even if you look at the way that Louisville has performed historically, even through the Great Recession, we're kind of an insulated market. So you don't have these massive highs or these massive lows. And so I think that's one of the things that people are pleasantly surprised when they look at our market, is that they're kind of insulated from the volatility of the coasts. And ultimately that's why we've had more outside investors come in to look at our market as a viable option for investment. So I don't know if there's any one thing. I mean, I could get really granular and talk about different parts of town that experience revitalization. And, I'm heavily invested in a part of town called Shelby Park, which is a vibrant and growing corridor in town, particularly when it comes to retail.
Yeah.
Smoketown is experiencing a lot of growth. And then Nulu is obviously where, a lot of people end up when they come to town staying. It's kind of the hip place to be. So,
that was my next question.
If you'd like, or I can stay high level.
My next question was going to be quick. If I say Nulu, the Highlands, and Old Louisville, what's the first word that comes to mind for each?
Nulu's hip. I mean, it's kind of where a lot of big money investments happening. The Highlands is eclectic, but it also has a lot of great spots to eat. It is definitely a great market to be in for the right user. I think there's some national brands that come in, they look at the demographics of the Highlands and say, oh, this could be a great place for us to locate. But the people who live in the Highlands typically are much more interested in having a concept that is local or at a minimal regional, because if you're a big brand coming in, we've seen large brands come and go in that market, even though the demographics support any type of national user. It's just not something that they're interested in. So that's one thing. Old Louisville, I actually lived in Old Louisville when I first moved here. I bought a fourplex in Old Louisville and house hacked that. It's a great submarket. It's got the largest concentration of Victorian homes in the country, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's number one or number two. I think number one, maybe Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But we're in the top three for sure. Areas of concentration for Victorian homes. Beautiful architecture right down the street from, or I guess Old Louisville University is right there, University of Louisville. So you've got a lot of student population. It's a mix of different young professionals and people who have lived there for many years. And I really enjoyed living there. The walkability is phenomenal. So that's kind of just a quick summary.
Yep. Had to ask you that question because after your LinkedIn post about those different neighborhoods, that got me really interested in learning more about those spots. So you guys heard it here. If you are interested in Louisville, I mean, the guy that you need to talk to about these different markets and positioning your brand, what type of investment going where, you need to talk to Raphael. Let's switch gears just a little bit, man. You've built a strong brand using social media and content, and I know we've talked about this, but how did you get started with that? And maybe if you had some advice that you could give to brokers who are wanting to leverage digital marketing but don't know where to begin, maybe just give them some quick advice.
Yeah. So I'll give some context of when I started creating content, and then we'll get to today. So back in 2016, I was at my previous career, and I was living in an island in Puerto Rico, right on the beach, making a good amount of money as my consulting role, my software consulting role. But inside, I felt kind of unfulfilled and lost and confused. So what I started to kind of do was to learn about all the different things that are out there regarding personal development. So I started reading a bunch of books. I started doing a bunch of research online, and it started really changing the way that I viewed my life. And I started progressing in a positive way in a variety of different aspects. And so I said, okay, well, instead of me just keeping this to myself, let me start writing about it. And so I started a blog called The Strong Professional, and I started releasing articles every other week on different topics pertaining to personal development and growth. And so I did that for about a year. Actually, I started back in 2015. And then after about, 30 articles, I realized I had about 35,000 words that I had written. And I'd read an article about how, in an article that I had read a while back, it had referenced how 50,000 words was essentially a 200-page book. And so I said, oh, shoot, well, I already have 35,000 words. All I have to do is write another 15 and round it out, and now I got a book. So that was my first book that I wrote, which was the Millennial Playbook. And after that, I started writing books pertaining to personal development, professional development, personal growth. financial literacy, etc. So I wrote 4 books pertaining to that.
Wow.
And then when I got into commercial real estate brokerage back in mid 2019, I started going through the process of trying to figure out how to operate in the commercial real estate space. And then COVID hit. And so I was essentially trying to find a way to be able to stay front of mind with my clients, even though they weren't actively doing stuff. And so, previously when I was in my previous career, I was creating, not only the books, but I would do YouTube videos about the different topics that I was learning about. So I said, you know what, let me go ahead and start a kind of a Q&A / interview format online, because everyone's online. I had a captive audience. And so that's where the inspiration for the Commercial Real Estate 101 podcast came to be. And so I started doing that. I started creating videos. And then because I'd already written 4 books on personal and professional development, I said, well, let me start writing books on commercial real estate. And so that's where Before You Sign That Lease came into play. Interestingly enough, a mutual connection of ours, Tyler Cobble, was one who kind of inspired me to do that, because I read his book, Open for Business, and I'm like, this is the most brilliant thing ever. And so, I definitely took ideas from what he was talking about and made them my own and rounded it out. And that became the first book, Before You Sign That Lease. Since then, I've written another book called Before You Buy That Building, which is about the process of purchasing commercial real estate. And then I've written a book now, written the book called Before You Sell That Building, which is for people who are looking to sell commercial real estate, how to properly position their assets so they can maximize the value they ultimately achieve. And now I'm writing a book on how to become a effective commercial real estate broker. And eventually, as I start getting more into development, I'm going to write a book called Before You Develop That Building. And that'll essentially be part of the series that I create pertaining to commercial real estate. So that's how I progressed to where I'm at today. But as far as the growth that I've experienced on social media, it's all about consistency. I started back in early 2020, and I've just been posting pretty much every day on these platforms, whether that's LinkedIn, obviously Facebook, YouTube. I've been trying to push out between 2 to 3 pieces of content a week. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but every week I post something. I don't put myself in a position where I don't post anything for a period of time. It's just, to you, right? Similar to you, you make a commitment to yourself and say, on this day, I have to release something, and this is when it's going to get done, and then it gets done. So I think that's kind of the moral of the story, is that it's more about being consistent than it is about creating the most high quality production. Because at the end of the day, the first, 50 videos that I created all pretty much sucked. And then over time you get better and better and better. And now I feel pretty comfortable in front of a camera, and I can deliver content in a much more value-driven way. So
absolutely. Well, I've got some things I want to double click on before we do. The other Raphael has typed in here today. Raphael Lupien says, Raphael, CRE 101 is full of great content. Highly, highly recommend. Thanks for being here, Raphael. Great name. I love saying it today multiple times. I want to double click on a couple questions that I've got. You and I have a similarity. When I first got started in creating content, it was because I was reading books, I was writing book reports, and I started a blog on WordPress. And then one day I looked up after about 50 articles, and it said like 27,000 people are following this WordPress blog. And I'm like, wait, what? I have not done any marketing for this. It was just, and this was before, all these other blog sites were up. You could create a WordPress blog and just like put it out there. And it just had a user base and all of this. And so I somehow ended up getting those emails, and then I generated a newsletter, right? And so I started to write on that newsletter instead through MailChimp, very simple, but it was just what I was learning. One question on that front. You've written, now 9 books,
seven books. Yeah.
7 books.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy writing? And how did you kind of get into that? Did you have an editor help you with that? Was it a stream of consciousness? I know the first one was mostly just your blogs, and you had to kind of repurpose them into chapters, but these other ones have been very specifically focused on a piece of real estate or a piece of, personal development. Do you enjoy the writing process?
I didn't at first by any means. I'm definitely more, I don't remember which side of the brain you described it, but I'm an engineer by trade. So I'm very logical, very matter of fact, black and white when it comes to the way that I view certain things about the world. And when it came to writing, I just didn't understand the subjectivity of it. I whenever we wrote a paper and someone said, hey, you got a B, when in reality I felt like I should deserve an A, but there was no way to really determine why that was the case outside of maybe grammatical errors. But that never really registered with me. But I think what compelled me to do it was that I felt that there wasn't a lot out there that was describing what I was learning in a manner such that it would become valuable for other people. So I figured, okay, well, there's got to be something that I can do myself to be able to deliver content in a way that maybe someone else resonates with. And so it started off as more of like a drive or just something compelling me to do it. And at first it was very difficult, but over time I got into a rhythm where I was writing 250 to 500 words a day. And that was every morning. It didn't matter what it was. Before getting started with the day, I would go to the gym, come home, grab a cup of coffee, and then I'd start writing. And there would be times where I didn't really know what to write, and it was very difficult, and maybe it took me longer to write than subsequent days, but I always got the 250 to 500 words. And there would be times where I was writing, I had a stream of consciousness and I was writing like crazy, and maybe I got to 1,000 words, but the minimum I could do was 250. And so when you think about it, if you write 250 words for 200 days, you've got 50,000 words, and 50,000 words is a 200-page book. So I broke it down in that way, and it really helped me break it down so that I could ultimately achieve what I was trying to achieve. And the way I did it oftentimes too is I created a book outline, created the ideas that I wanted to talk about. And there would be days where I'd maybe look at the first chapter and be like, you know what, I really don't have anything to talk about right now. So maybe I'd go down to the third chapter or fourth chapter, and maybe some inspiration came, and I said, okay, well, let me write about that. So it was never a linear path where it's like I start with the first chapter and with the last chapter. It was, I created the outline, and now I can write in different things depending on what I was feeling that day. And ultimately what I did too, which I always recommend for people who are writing, is to not edit while you're writing, just write, just throw it on the page and have a session later, maybe on the weekends, where you sit down and say, okay, let me go back through this and get an understanding of, what needs to be taken out. How can we reword something so that it conveys better, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, it reminds me of a few different writers that I have heard. James Clear being one of them. Obviously, very habit driven, Atomic Habits, and writing every single day. I forget who else maybe
On Writing was a phenomenal book. It's from Stephen King.
Okay,
he wrote the book, and I'm not a big horror fan, but I remember when I read On Writing, I was like, wow, like it's just a phenomenal book. I mean, if you want to become a writer or you want to start writing a book, like I would highly recommend people read that book. It was just it was very enlightening to get an understanding of how his mind works when it comes to writing.
Sure. Okay. So second point I want to kind of, double click on for this is, what benefits have you seen having those books? Does it help you out there? Is there a landing page where owners can go to get the book, and are they lead magnets and all of that? Like, that's one thing I really want to point towards, right? It's like, you've got these physical assets and digital assets that have been well thought out, your written word. Maybe you've had AI help you edit them at some point, but like, you were writing them before AI was out there. So
yeah, no, all my books have been written before ChatGPT was.
So now you can just like say, ChatGPT, write me a book, and a lot of it's garbage, right? But these are your thoughts, clearly, concisely, in a compelling way, put together. So there is value there. How do you deliver that value to the stakeholders that you're trying to get it to, and what benefits have you seen from that?
Oh, tons of benefits. I've been able to secure listings as a result of me having written this book. And what it often comes down to is that, hey, I'll physically meet with the owner. We'll maybe grab a coffee, or I'll meet them on site or whatever. And then what I'll do is I'll either have a copy ready to go where I sign it and say, hey, here's a copy of my book that, kind of explains the process. And then, whether or not they actually read it, oftentimes they don't. But the mere fact that I have the book and that I've shown that I understand the process of how things work leads to business. And it's directly led to business for me. Along with that too is when you're working with tenants, for example, the before you sign that lease book is a great one, because I can prep them for the road ahead. And so I provide them with a book. I tell them, hey, read this and do everything you need to do prior to us getting started with the leasing process, because it helps avoid a bunch of effort on my part to try to get them back into line so that they can ultimately lease a commercial space. And that works well with startups and the like. And so that's where I've seen a lot of value as well. Audible books. So I created Audible versions of all these books. And now another thing that I do is I text clients sometimes like, hey, here's a copy of the book, but if you don't like reading the book for whatever reason, here's a copy of the Audible version. And so they can listen to it like in a podcast format. And these are relatively concise books. I mean, we're talking, no more than 150 pages. And so you can listen to it in a hour and a half to 2 hour window and get the gist of what you're trying to accomplish. And so, yes, absolutely, that I do provide that as a way for me to show value to clients.
Awesome, man. Fantastic. Thanks for walking us through that. I don't know if many people have asked you that process before, so hopefully that was kind of some new content for people to see. You know what? I'm going to shift. We're coming up on time, Raphael. I'm not going to talk. We'll maybe have to have you back to talk through keys to differentiation. You just outlined like 4 to 5 different ways to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, right? So we can come back to this. What I really want to spend some time on is right now, your key takeaways from doing business since 2019, right? You've worked with a lot of clients. What are your top 5 lessons from working with both buyers and sellers right now?
Top 5 lessons. That's a good question. I think that one of the things that brokers have to get good at is learning to set expectations early and often and constantly communicate, because I think what often happens, especially when you're early in your career, is that you're trying to get every single opportunity. It doesn't really matter what that opportunity is. And so what ends up happening is that maybe you're talking to a seller and they have an unrealistic expectation of what their property's worth. And even though you provide them with the data to support a particular value and they want another value, oftentimes you may say, you know what, I'm going to take the listing and see what I can do with it. And so you end up promising to the seller that you can help them sell their property, when in reality, maybe it's not able to be sold at that particular value. And so even though you're trying to do your best to sell the property, oftentimes what ends up happening is that the seller gets upset because they're obviously not getting their expectations met. And then, you ultimately are out of, you're putting yourself in a position where you're marketing a property that the marketplace isn't going to support. And then you start getting a reputation of saying, oh, well, this person is just posting stuff that's not really going to trade. And so there's a double-edged sword. So I think that if anything, sometimes being willing to step away and say, you know what, this is probably just not a good fit, even though you're in a position where you're not making a whole lot of money. I think my first year I made $13,000. So it's not, you're kind of in that, you can be in that situation. And so I think that every time I talk to newer agents in particular, I try to present them with that as a lesson, say, look, it's better to work with clients that are able to get something done versus just, working with anyone, because this is ultimately what's going to end up happening. And so I would say that's number one. From buyers, I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of times too, we work with different types of buyers, whether that's investment buyers or owner user buyers. So a lot of times with owner users, you have to kind of educate them on the process, in particular if they're not familiar with buying commercial real estate. And so that's where building your team is very important as a broker. So you have to have a variety of different lenders that you can touch base on. You need to be able to understand what they look for so you can make sure that the process goes very smoothly. And ultimately your lender should be someone who can educate clients and be an advocate for them with loan committee. So that's very important. And then obviously attorneys for reviewing of contracts, whether that's leasing or even purchasing, oftentimes it could be helpful. And then, closing attorneys. So, building your teams to make sure that you can actually get the transaction to the finish line is very, very helpful. Another lesson.
Yeah, man. I want to double click on that real quick too is, there's not a whole lot of resources out there for closing transactions. There's all these resources about how to underwrite commercial real estate, how to market properties, letters of intent. But once that deal is under contract, how do we be proactive, get ahead of the problems that are coming to ensure that we can give the best likelihood of success for this transaction? Closing transactions, I think, if you're not going to write the book, maybe I need to write the book on how to close commercial real estate transactions, because, man, it is so hard to get a buyer and seller even on the same page, right? For them to just walk away from that transaction is such a loss for everyone involved, and so being able to get in and actually explain that process, I haven't seen any resources out there. And so anyways, that's just one of my thoughts. I'm so glad
before you buy that building. There you go.
There you go. Exactly. Okay. So that book's coming.
True. It definitely is something. And this comes from experience.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing too, which we deal with, I'm sure you deal with all the time, is ego. I mean, you got people that will literally blow up a deal over a minimal amount of money. I remember one time we were under contract on it was a 2.6 set. It was a 2.6 to $2.7 million retail center. And I was representing the buyer and the seller on the other side. They were apart by 10 grand. So the seller wanted 2.67 and my client was like, I'm not going a penny above 2.66. And I was like, you guys got to be kidding me. We're talking I don't remember the total.
Right.
You can do the math, but it was a minimal amount of a percentage of the ultimate transaction. And so I ended up sitting down with my client and said, look, this is, yes, it's $10,000. I don't want to make light of the fact that $10,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, because it is. I'm not saying that, but let's do the math. So what does this translate as far as your loan and your ultimate payment? So at the time, rates were like 4%. So I said, okay, what this means is that you're going to have to come to the table with an additional $2,000 because it was an 80-20 deal. And your mortgage payment is going to go up by $44 a month. And I said, okay, are you willing to walk away from this deal based on that situation? It's a $44 a month problem. It's not a $10,000 problem.
That's right.
Sometimes breaking it down in that way helps them better understand how to approach the process. And ultimately we were able to get the deal done because it was not about the 10,000. It was about the mere fact that I need to get what I want. It's not about the logic behind it. And so anyways, I thought
absolutely. You're well read because you have an engineer's mind. And I often say that, like, in a past life, I was an engineer because everything is a formula for me. X plus Y equals Z, right? Now, I'm not formally trained as an engineer by any means, but I have put together and taken apart things my whole life. My wife is always like, how do you know how to do that? And it's like, well, I just started using my hands when I was 14 years old, right? So I started figuring those things out. But I also was raised by a mother and two sisters. And so I have a high emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, right? So oftentimes, if you have that engineer formulaic brain, you do not have that kind of emotional intelligence. I've got this unique blend, and it sounds like you have the same thing, right? You have to have the numbers, but then the art of the deal is just as important once something is under contract. So I'm so glad to hear that. And I think that's a top kind of blend of skill sets that top brokers actually do have. They either have it on the team or they have it themselves, and they can bring it together and create that synergy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think too, you have to address people's concerns and their feelings, because in reality, I mean, you're navigating through a very large transaction oftentimes. And so I think sometimes you get people that are very analytical. They say, well, why can't people understand this? Or why can't people see it the way I see it? But they don't really understand that maybe it's not just about that. It's about something else. And so you have to be able to dig and understand your client and get an understanding of what the holdup is, so you can ultimately acknowledge what they're feeling and then ultimately get them to where they want to ultimately get to, because sometimes there's just a block because of the way that they're feeling. And so it is a more nuanced business than sometimes people give it, is that it's not just a numbers and cents. It's oftentimes you have to blend a lot of that together. So, man,
I could talk to you for days, man. We are wrapping up here, so we're going to get some quick takes going on. But you're outside of your books. What's your favorite commercial real estate book?
Man, Industrialize. My buddy Chad Griffiths wrote a phenomenal book. He's just a wealth of knowledge on
my desk right here. So,
industrial, real estate. Yeah, so he's great. It's been great. Really, really good book.
Awesome, man. I would second that. I've got it right here on my book. Not very many books are here. My Kobe book is here. Selling Buildings. Alan Buchanan's book is here. I haven't dove into that yet. I got my buddy Chuck Kuda's book here, Flex Space Domination, and Jocko Willink. So very few books actually make it on my desk, but that's what's sitting here right now. So that's awesome, man. You've given so much advice, but maybe for commercial real estate investors, brokers, what's your best piece of advice?
Small, positive, consistent action over time adds up to massive results. So don't break down everything into component parts. Don't look at the big goal of saying, oh, I want to build a, whatever, right? It's what daily habits do I need to make to do what do I have to do every day to get to where ultimately I want to go, and break it down so that you can actually take action every day. Yes. And you'll be amazed what you can accomplish in a short period of time.
I often say just try to be 1% better, right?
Mhm.
And I was listening to Tim Grover and Andy Frisella this morning. They said, when you get to a certain point of efficiency and effectiveness in a role, being 1% better is so hard. However, you can make big strides early on in your career if you're trying to focus on and striving to be 1% better every single day. So I hear some more James Clear coming through right there. Atomic Habits. That's fantastic. Love that. What's a trend in commercial real estate that not enough people are watching right now?
Suburban office is coming back.
Come on, man. Michael
dude,
Bowl, let's go.
I love it. I mean, I'm telling you, I would love to buy suburban office. I'm very bullish on the future of office, even though there's a lot of people that are poo-pooing it. I do think that it is very market specific and even more granular than that, sub-market specific. So if you have any interest in doing so, you need to talk to people who have a working knowledge of the area. And I would recommend office to people for sure.
Absolutely. Got a group in town that I'm meeting with at 3 p.m. today that are coming up to buy an office building here in Kansas City. So very, very cool stuff. All right, we talked a little bit about your book, right? That's coming up, before you develop that building. But what outside of that, what's next for you, man?
So yeah, I mean that's an area that I really want to push into. I've recently joined forces with Christy Candle, who runs local real estate developers. So we have a podcast together. I'm a
client of Christy's, by the way, because of you. So
you got connected with her?
Oh, not just connected. I'm having my second call with her on Friday. So
she's amazing. She's really an impressive person. Really honored to be a part of her network. But anyway, so we're focusing on that podcast, but also really I want to get more into the real estate development space. So, this last year we bought a couple of properties. One was more of like a stable, buy the property, put a tenant in there. They renovated the space and now it's more stable property. The other two buildings that we bought eventually will be a retail development. Interestingly enough, with Tyler Cobble, his wash concept. We'd like to try to maybe do something not necessarily like that in Louisville, but at least provide spaces where people who are looking to open up a restaurant can do so at a relatively affordable rate. Just because we are such a foodie city, and we have the Sullivan University that has a very well regarded culinary program. There's a lot of people that are always coming out of the university looking to either affiliate with some local restaurants or them start their own restaurants. So I think there will be a significant amount of demand for that. And then again, continue to grow the brokerage. We started back in January of this year. We started to experience pretty good growth, which is awesome. We're going to be onboarding our first agent here shortly, and then continue to grow that, and then eventually start raising capital to take down projects. And that's kind of I'd say the year to 2 year goal is to try to raise a fund, or maybe not even raise a fund, but start raising some capital to take down some projects.
Wonderful, man. Well, it's been an absolute blast getting to know you better, just sharing our networks together. Point people in the right direction, man. They want to follow you. They want to get access to your books, your content. Where should they head?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. My name is Raphael Collazo, Collazo. You can find me online. If you plug in my name on Google, you should be able to find everything you need. Very accessible. Just shoot me a text, send me an email. I try to get back to you as soon as I can. I think it's important for us to be able to make ourselves relatively accessible to people, because I when I first started, I had a lot of people that were in my corner and really were mentors of mine. And if there's any way I can share insights with people, it's definitely something I'm willing to do. Yeah. And then, my website, you'll be able to access all the content, and even my books are on my website as well.
Well, very much appreciate your time here today, man. If you guys are interested in talking about Kansas City real estate, commercial real estate, we've already talked about all the different asset classes. Reach out to us right here, www.mwcreadvisors.com. We really appreciate everyone tuning in. Raphael, I know you can't see it. I can see it on my side. There was a lot of people tuning in today live, which doesn't usually happen. Most of the time, people just watch this on the recording. But we're on all of the Spotify, the Apple, the iHeartRadio, if anybody even still uses that. But we're out on all the podcast platforms now. Please do share it, like it, subscribe, whatever you need to do. We're also live on LinkedIn, on YouTube on a regular basis. Raphael, thank you so much for your time, man. I know that this was extremely beneficial, and just appreciate you taking an hour out of your busy schedule for us today.
Honor to be here, man.
Thanks, guys, and we'll catch you next time on the Kansas City Commercial Real Estate Market Pulse.